Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said I was too focused on intimacy, like it was a flaw in my character. Like wanting to touch my wife after 10 years of marriage meant I was needy, unsophisticated, distracting. She said it calmly, professionally, the same tone she used with employees when she set boundaries. I remember nodding once, because that's what I do when something doesn't deserve an argument. What I didn't say was simple. She wasn't avoiding intimacy. She was just redirecting it. My name is Daniel Moore. I'm 42. I own a small logistics company outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing flashy. Warehouses, schedules, fuel costs, margins that live or die on discipline. I built it from one truck and a borrowed line of credit. Structure keeps things alive. Emotion just muddies the math. That morning started like most mornings. I grabbed a coffee from Dunkin' on the way to the main warehouse. Same order, same silence in the car. My Toyota Camry hummed the way it always did. Steady, reliable, invisible. I like that. No drama before 8 a.m. My wife, Claire, worked HR in my company. People thought that was risky, mixing marriage and business. But Claire was good at her job. Culture, trust, communication. Words she used a lot. She said people needed to feel seen. I believed her. I just didn't realize she meant by someone else. The comment about intimacy came the night before, in our kitchen. No yelling. No tears. She said I was putting pressure on her, that she was exhausted, that my expectations made her pull away. She said I needed to respect her boundaries. Then she picked up her phone and scrolled while I stood there holding a glass of water I didn't drink. I didn't argue. I don't chase moving targets. At work, everything ran clean. Our operations manager, Ryan, was my best hire. Sharp, calm, loyal. He knew every route, every driver, every weak spot in our system. I trusted him with the business because he never missed a detail. He also knew my schedule better than anyone, including my wife. That afternoon, I watched Claire laugh in the break room. Not with me. With him. It was nothing obvious. Just a hand on his arm. A lean in. The kind of body language you only notice when it's been missing at home. That night, she stayed late. Said HR stuff. Compliance review. I nodded again. I didn't feel angry. I felt something quieter. Like a switch being flipped. When someone tells you to stop wanting them, eventually you listen. And once you stop, it's almost impossible to start again. The next few days rearranged themselves without discussion. That's how real shifts happen. Not with announcements, but with absences. I stopped reaching for her in the mornings. Stopped waiting up for her when she said she'd be late. Not as a tactic. As a response. When a door keeps closing, you eventually stop standing in the hallway. At work, Claire stayed efficient. Polite. Professional. She sent calendar invites instead of asking questions in person. HR memos instead of conversations. She was excellent at creating distance that still looked cooperative. People praised her for it. I noticed how often Ryan was in her office. Always with the door half open. Always just long enough to be reasonable. One evening we went to Costco together. It used to be an event. Jokes in the aisles. Arguments about bulk sizes. That night it was transactional. She followed the list. I pushed the cart. No commentary. No tension. Just two adults executing a task. At checkout, the cashier asked if we wanted boxes. Claire answered without looking at me. I didn't correct her. Silence is easier when you don't fight it. At home, she claimed the couch. I took the desk in the spare room. She watched Netflix with the volume low, episodes bleeding into each other. I worked with headphones on, spreadsheets open, numbers clean and obedient. Systems don't lie. They respond exactly to the input you give them. People aren't like that. I started noticing patterns. Claire's energy wasn't gone. It was redistributed. She laughed more during the day. She dressed differently for work. Subtle upgrades. Not for me. For the environment where she felt seen. HR taught her how to read people. She just forgot she was transparent, too. Ryan started handling things I usually reviewed personally. He didn't overstep. He anticipated. Sent updates before I asked. Stayed late when Claire stayed late. Left when she left. Nothing that could be accused. Everything that could be understood. I didn't confront either of them. I didn't need confirmation. Quiet people don't require proof to adjust. They trust the data. And the data was consistent. At night, Claire started asking if I was okay. Not emotionally. Logistically. Did I need anything? Was I busy tomorrow? She framed concern the way she framed performance reviews. Neutral. Observational. Safe. I told her everything was fine. Because it was. For the first time in a while, I wasn't negotiating my presence. I was just present. Or absent. On my terms. She noticed the change, but not the reason. That's the mistake people make. They think distance is a phase. They don't realize it's a decision. And once that decision is made, the room never feels the same again. Saturday used to mean sleeping in and pretending the week hadn't taken anything from us. Now it meant separation by routine. I left early, not to escape, but because idle time invites questions. I stopped at Home Depot and walked the aisles without urgency. Screws. Paint. Lumber I didn't need yet. Small projects create the illusion of progress. They keep your hands busy while your mind recalibrates. When I got back, Claire was already dressed, phone in hand, keys on the counter. She said she was meeting a friend. I nodded. That nod had become my signature. It closed conversations before they opened. She paused like she wanted to add something, then didn't. Control is easier when the other person stops pulling. At the warehouse, Ryan handled things smoothly. Too smoothly. He anticipated delays I hadn't mentioned. He knew when I'd be off-site before I said it out loud. That kind of alignment only comes from proximity, or from shared calendars and shared confidence. He didn't avoid me. He respected me. That was the problem. Respect makes betrayal quieter. I reviewed numbers alone. Profit margins were up. Turnover was down. Claire's culture initiatives were working. People felt safe, engaged, valued. I wondered who was valuing her. At home, she started reorganizing. Closets, drawers, the garage. She said clutter stressed her out. I noticed boxes leaving the house. Items photographed neatly. She didn't announce it, but I saw listings open on her phone one night. Facebook Marketplace is subtle like that. Things disappear without a conversation. One chair at a time. One lamp. One shared memory priced to move. We ate dinner together without phones. That was new. She asked about my day. I answered in summaries. No texture. No color. She filled the space with her own updates. HR workshops. Team lunches. Ryan's name surfaced naturally, frequently, like it belonged there. I didn't flinch. I logged it. At night, she reached across the bed once, her hand light on my arm. Not desire. Testing. I didn't move. She withdrew it slowly, like someone touching a hot surface and pretending they meant to. The next morning, she asked if something was wrong. Not emotionally. Structurally. Was I unhappy? Was work stressful? I told her everything was stable, which was true. What she didn't understand was that stability isn't warmth. It's a plateau. And once you settle there, you don't fall. You just stop climbing. She thought the silence meant patience. She didn't realize it meant acceptance. The shift became visible to everyone except the two people causing it. That's usually how it goes. Outsiders feel temperature changes before the ones standing in the fire. I kept my mornings intact. Coffee, route planning, quiet drive. I stopped at Dunkin' out of habit, not comfort. Routine keeps the mind sharp when emotion tries to interfere. I didn't bring anything home for Claire anymore. No small gestures. No thought experiments disguised as kindness. When you stop investing, the returns stop matching. At the company, I adjusted my calendar. Fewer overlapping meetings. More time off-site. I trusted the structure enough to step back. That trust wasn't blind. It was deliberate. Watching people behave when they think they're unobserved tells you everything. Ryan started making decisions faster. Not reckless. Confident. Claire supported them publicly. Backed him in meetings. Framed it as leadership development. I approved it all. Growth requires delegation. Delegation reveals alignment. I saw where theirs was pointing. At home, Claire filled the silence with activity. She suggested shows we could watch together. I declined without explanation. She watched Netflix alone, volume low, lights off, like she was trying not to disturb someone who wasn't sleeping. I worked late, not because I needed to, but because it clarified boundaries. When you stop competing for attention, you stop losing. She began dressing differently even on weekends. Casual, but intentional. Hair done before errands. Perfume for grocery runs. I noticed everything. I commented on nothing. Silence trains people to expose themselves. One night she asked if I was pulling away. Not accusing. Curious. I told her I was focused. That was enough to end the conversation. Focus is respected in men like an alibi. What she didn't say mattered more. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked if I was still engaged. Engagement is a metric. Feeling is a risk. She'd chosen metrics. I reviewed company access logs later that week. Not out of suspicion, out of habit. Patterns matter. Claire and Ryan's schedules overlapped more than necessary. Nothing explicit. Everything suggestive. Shared late nights. Coordinated absences. Clean on paper. Intimate in practice. I didn't screenshot anything. Didn't save files. I wasn't building a case. I was building distance. The next Saturday, I went back to Home Depot and bought materials for a fence I hadn't planned yet. Projects don't argue. They don't ask why you're quiet. They just respond to pressure. When I got home, Claire looked at the lumber and asked what it was for. I told her I needed space to find. She laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. By the 5th week, the house felt staged. Not empty. Curated. Claire moved through rooms like a guest trying not to leave fingerprints. She smiled more, but it never reached her eyes when she looked at me. It stayed reserved for elsewhere. For work. For her phone. I started leaving earlier and coming back later. Not dramatically, just enough to change patterns. I drive the car until the radio faded into static, then turn it off and sit with my thoughts. Silence is useful when you're recalculating value. At the warehouse, I let Ryan run a full operations meeting without me. He performed well. Confident. Comfortable. Too comfortable. Claire watched him the way HR watches potential. Proud. Invested. Familiar. People don't notice when admiration turns physical because it doesn't announce itself. It just relocates. I didn't attend the team dinner that Friday. Said I had family obligations. Claire went anyway. She texted once, asking if I needed anything. I replied no. That was true. I needed nothing from her anymore. That realization landed cleanly. No pain. Just clarity. At home, the spare room became my office permanently. I stopped pretending it was temporary. Claire noticed the chair move. The door closing. The routine setting in. She asked if we were okay. I said we were stable. She didn't like that word. Stability doesn't need reassurance. She started watching Netflix later into the night, episodes auto-playing while she scrolled on her phone. I worked quietly, numbers lining up the way they always had. When people say relationships take work, they forget that work can also be an escape. Boxes continued to disappear from the garage. Small things at first. Decorative items. Old equipment. I didn't ask. One night, I saw her photographing a lamp, adjusting the light, wiping dust off the base. Facebook Marketplace makes endings look practical. Necessary. Temporary. She didn't mention it. I didn't either. Saturday morning, we went to Costco again. The list was shorter. The cart lighter. We moved efficiently. No shared commentary. No impulse purchases. At checkout, she hesitated, like she wanted to say something important. Then she didn't. Control requires timing. She was waiting for leverage. That afternoon, I reviewed staff access logs again. Not obsessively. Methodically. Claire and Ryan had sync time off the following Friday. Same hours. Different excuses. That kind of coordination isn't accidental. It's rehearsed. I closed the laptop and went outside to work on the fence. Measured. Leveled. Secured posts into the ground. Physical boundaries are easier to build than emotional ones. They don't argue back. Claire watched from the window. Not suspicious. Curious. Like she sensed something shifting under her feet, but couldn't see the fault line. She still thought I was waiting. I wasn't. The Friday they synced their time off, I didn't acknowledge it. I left the house like it was any other workday. Calm. Predictable. She watched me from the kitchen, waiting for something. A question. A challenge. A crack. I gave her nothing. I drove past the warehouse and kept going. No detours. No dramatic exits. Just distance. I stopped at Dunkin' out of muscle memory and sat in the parking lot longer than necessary, watching people move with purpose that had nothing to do with me. When you step outside your own routine, you start seeing how small it really was. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. When someone reallocates intimacy, they also reallocate attention. They stop checking mirrors. They assume the house is quiet because no one's home, not because someone is listening. I spent the morning at Home Depot again, not buying anything, just walking. Watching couples argue over fixtures. Watching men measure twice and cut once. Control looks boring when it's done right. When I got home, the house was empty. Her car was gone. I noticed the absence the way you notice missing inventory. Clean. Documented. No emotional annotation. I worked from the spare room that afternoon, door closed. Numbers aligned. Contracts renewed. Ryan emailed updates without copying Claire for the first time in weeks. That stood out. People change behavior when they think the window is open. She came home later than expected. Hair different. Energy high, then cautious when she saw me. She asked how my day was. I said productive. That word ended it. That night, she tried to initiate closeness. Not physically, strategically. She suggested we watch something together. Picked a show on Netflix and sat closer than she had in weeks. I didn't move. I didn't reject her. I just stayed exactly where I was. Halfway through the episode, she checked her phone twice. Then a third time. Muscle memory betrays loyalty before words do. She went quiet when she realized I noticed. Later, she asked if I still found her attractive. Not vulnerable. Evaluative. Like she was auditing damage. I told her attraction wasn't the issue. That answer confused her. Confusion is uncomfortable for people who manage narratives. The next morning, I found more empty spaces in the garage. Items gone. Shelves lighter. She was still selling pieces of our life on Facebook Marketplace, but now she did it faster. Urgently. Endings accelerate when control slips. I didn't stop her. I didn't comment. I adjusted. She thought my silence meant forgiveness. She didn't understand it meant I was already somewhere else. The tension shifted when she realized silence wasn't a phase anymore. It wasn't punishment or mood. It was absence with structure. People can tolerate anger. They can argue with distance. What they can't manage is neutrality. Claire started overperforming at home. Cooking meals I didn't ask for. Cleaning spaces I already maintained. Leaving notes about schedules and reminders like we were co-workers sharing a lease. I thanked her politely. Courtesy confuses people who expect emotion as currency. At work, the alignment between her and Ryan became more visible because it stopped trying to hide. They spoke freely in meetings. Finished each other's operational thoughts. It looked efficient. It also looked intimate. The staff noticed. I let them. Systems correct themselves when leadership stops interfering. One afternoon, I skipped the warehouse entirely and worked from a coffee shop instead. Same drink, same seat, no one who knew me. I watched emails stack up without urgency. Ryan handled the delivery issue without escalating it. Claire sent a company-wide message about communication standards and trust. I read it twice. Language always tells you who it's meant to reassure. That night, she asked directly if I was planning to leave. Not emotionally. Practically. I told her I had no immediate plans. That answer unsettled her more than a yes would have. Uncertainty erodes control faster than truth. She brought up counseling. Framed it as proactive. Healthy. I told her she was free to pursue whatever support she needed. I didn't volunteer to join. When someone realizes you're no longer invested in fixing what they broke, panic looks like productivity. She spent that weekend listing more items online. Larger ones now. Furniture. Decor we'd chosen together. Facebook Marketplace made the process efficient. Transactional. She moved quickly, like she was racing an ending she couldn't name. I went to Costco alone that Sunday. Bought what I needed. Nothing extra. When I came home, she noticed the receipt on the counter and asked why I didn't call. I said I didn't think to. That hurt landed late. Later that evening, she tried to reconnect physically. Not desperate. Calculated. She sat close. Touched my hand. Waited. I didn't pull away. I didn't respond either. Stillness is louder than rejection. She withdrew and sat on the other end of the couch, pretending to watch Netflix while watching me instead. Measuring. Adjusting. Losing ground. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't withholding affection to teach a lesson. I was conserving it because it no longer belonged there. You don't fight for places that have already replaced you. The break didn't come with a confession. It came with a scheduling error. Ryan approved an operational change without flagging me. Not a crisis. Not sabotage. Just a quiet reroute that benefited one client and inconvenienced another. Normally, he'd ask. This time, he assumed. Assumption is what happens when someone feels protected. I reviewed the numbers that night, not looking for betrayal, just alignment. The change favored a vendor Claire had advocated for weeks earlier during HR planning sessions. Wellness partnerships. Culture initiatives. I remembered her saying trust worked best when leadership felt unified. I wondered who she meant. At home, she was restless. Folding laundry that didn't need folding. Opening and closing apps without settling on anything. Netflix played in the background like white noise. She asked if I was upset about something at work. I told her operations were stable. That answer didn't soothe her. It never did. The next morning, I took the Camry and drove past the warehouse again. I didn't go in. I parked a block away and watched the building wake up. Trucks pulling in. Staff clocking on. Claire arrived early. Ryan arrived 5 minutes later. They didn't enter together. They didn't need to. Their timing was already synced. I left before they noticed the car. That afternoon, Claire sent me a message asking if we could talk. Not urgently. Not emotionally. Scheduled. I replied that I was tied up. Which was true. I was finalizing a contract extension that removed discretionary approval from Ryan's role. Quiet restructuring. No announcements. Just updated authority lines. When I got home, Claire had cleared more space. The living room looked lighter. Emptier. She'd sold the bookshelf we'd bought our first year married. I remembered assembling it wrong the first time. She didn't mention it. Facebook Marketplace leaves no room for nostalgia. That night, she finally asked what I wanted. Not from the marriage. From her. I told her I wanted clarity. That word landed hard. Clarity removes wiggle room. She went quiet. Not defensive. Afraid. People fear clarity when they've built comfort on ambiguity. Later, alone in the spare room, I reviewed the updated org chart. Claire still had access to sensitive scheduling data. That would change soon. HR doesn't need intimacy with operations. Just boundaries. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was hurting. Because the picture was complete. When someone tells you you're asking for too much and then gives more to someone else, the problem isn't desire. It's priority. And priorities don't argue. They act. The change took effect on a Monday. Quietly. No announcement, no meeting. Just updated permissions and revised reporting lines pushed through the system before most people logged in. Ryan lost discretionary authority over scheduling. Claire lost access to operational data that had nothing to do with HR. The company didn't slow down. It breathed easier. At home, Claire felt it before she understood it. She kept checking her phone that morning, refreshing apps like they might apologize. She asked if something happened at work. I told her operations were tightening. That was accurate. Precision feels personal when you're used to flexibility. She stayed late that night. Later than usual. When she came home, she didn't mention Ryan by name, but his absence hovered in the room. She said things felt different. I agreed. Different isn't bad. It's just unfamiliar. I didn't ask where she'd been. When someone expects interrogation and doesn't get it, they start volunteering. She didn't. She went quiet instead, sat on the edge of the bed like she was waiting for a verdict that wasn't coming. The next evening, she suggested we talk again. Not scheduled this time. Immediate. Emotional. She said she felt like she was losing me. That word again. Losing implies ownership. I didn't correct her. I told her I hadn't gone anywhere. I'd just stopped reaching. There's a difference. One demands chase. The other ends pursuit. She cried then. Not loudly. Controlled. The kind of crying that hopes to trigger repair. I watched without stepping in. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Comfort offered at the wrong time becomes permission to continue. That night, she watched Netflix alone again, volume low, shoulders tight. I worked in the spare room, door open, light on. Presence without engagement is the hardest thing to interpret. The next day, Ryan requested a meeting. Formal. Calendar invite. He sat across from me with his hands folded like he was trying to remember who he was supposed to be. He talked about alignment. About misunderstanding. About respect. I listened. I thanked him. I told him the structure was final. He nodded. He understood power when he felt it. At home, Claire had listed the last large item. The dining table. The one we'd eaten at for years without really sitting down together. Facebook Marketplace made quick work of it. Pickup scheduled. Clean ending. She asked me later if this was it. I told her this was what happened when people redirected intimacy and expected the original source to wait. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't need to. The silence said everything she'd avoided hearing. The house settled into its final version without a conversation. The dining table was picked up on a Tuesday afternoon while I was on a call. I heard the truck outside, the low scrape of legs on concrete, the door closing. When I walked through the room later, the space where it had been looked intentional, like it had always been meant to stay empty. Claire didn't ask where I was going anymore. I didn't ask where she'd been. We moved around each other with professional courtesy, polite distance, clean exchanges. She still lived there. So did I. But the version of me she'd been negotiating with was gone. Mornings stayed quiet. I kept the same routine. Same drive. Same stop for coffee. The familiar cup warming my hand before sunrise. Dunkin' tasted the same. That mattered more than it should have. Some things don't change just because you do. At work, the structure held. Ryan adjusted. He showed up on time and left on time. He avoided unnecessary contact with Claire. Not out of guilt. Out of self-preservation. People retreat when the room stops protecting them. Claire stopped staying late. She started coming home earlier, like proximity might rewind something. She asked once if we could plan a weekend away. I told her I didn't see the point. Not cruel, just honest. Planning requires a future you want to occupy together. At night, she watched Netflix with the volume higher now, like she wanted sound to fill the space where conversation used to be. I worked until the credits rolled and the screen went dark. When she finally turned the TV off, the silence felt earned. She asked one last time if I was done trying. I told her I hadn't stopped trying. I'd just stopped competing with people she chose more willingly. That wasn't an accusation. It was a conclusion. She cried quietly. I didn't hold her. Not because I didn't care, but because comfort would have rewritten the truth. And the truth deserved to stand on its own. Weeks passed. Nothing exploded. No confession came. No dramatic exit. Just erosion. She felt it in the way I stopped checking in, stopped noticing, stopped reacting. Control fades fastest when there's nothing left to control. I didn't leave the house. I didn't announce an ending. I simply became unavailable in every way that mattered. Some people expect anger when they withhold intimacy. They expect negotiation. What they don't expect is silence that doesn't ask to be filled. That silence is what stays with them. Long after you've moved on. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.